What's going on, everybody? This is the host of Recover Out Loud podcast, Sean Young. Before we dive in, I want to be clear. I'm not a medical professional. I'm not here to diagnose or treat. I'm simply a catalyst, someone who's walked through the fire and now speaks from experience, reflection, and a deep desire to help others find their way forward. This podcast may include honest conversations about addiction, mental health challenges, and suicidal thoughts or ideations. These are real parts of the human experience, and we won't shy away from them. If you're listening, please do so with self-care and self-awareness. And if you're struggling, please reach out. There's help out there. And most importantly, there's hope. Viewer discretion is advised. Now let's get it. What is going on, everybody? Welcome to Recover Out Loud. I am your host, Sean Young. Thank you for joining me today for this episode of Recover Out Loud. It is going to be an awesome information jam-packed session with another brother in recovery. I'd like to welcome Breeze Hall. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing well, man. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, man. Thanks for reaching out. Man. To start off, how's your morning going? How's your day going?
It's going well. I usually get up early, get some coffee in me, relax, taking it easy. I work second shift, so I'll be going to work after we record this.
Nice. That's awesome. Yeah. I've been trying to get up a little bit earlier every day. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes my alarm goes off and I'm like, you know what, dude, I don't have it in me to wake up right now.
Yeah, I struggle with bipolar. So there are points in time where I will sleep just a few hours and I'll just get up and go about my day. And then there's other times, low times, where I'll sleep excessively. So it's a constant swing.
Yeah. The ebbs and flows in the sleeping patterns is absolutely insane.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're gonna dive into it very quick. Brez, would you like to share your journey in recovery from addiction?
Yeah. Growing up, I was the middle child of three. I grew up in a household that, both parents struggle with addiction, alcoholism. My father was physically and emotionally abusive. So from a young age, even prior to substance abuse, I did whatever I could to escape reality. And I just did that through excess, whether that's video games or staying outside past, acceptable times and just trying to remove myself from that situation, both emotionally and physically. That I guess the drugs and alcohol kind of came in around 13 years old. I had a buddy who his mother would purchase us alcohol. This is early 90s. Drinking started there. And, I can reflect back and realize now that there were signs even then. Obviously, that wasn't apparent at the time. But, we would finish what was there and I wouldn't be done, we would get sick and my friends wouldn't want to drink the next day and I would be all for it, those kind of things. So I started smoking weed around that time as well, 13. And then 14 years old, my father passes of a heroin overdose. Um, Again, I didn't know that at the time. I just, I was told he was in an accident. Um, at that point, my mother kind of did what she did to survive, right? Started going out all the time, leaving us home alone, that kind of thing. And then with that freedom, things just kind of escalated. Um, you know, it was pretty much alcohol and marijuana through high school in excessive amounts. I actually dropped out in the 12th grade because I was too concerned or wrapped up in that life. Around 19 years old is when I tried, I guess you would say, and that would be, I tried cocaine first at like 19. Things progressively get worse, but I was able to control my life, which is really where I struggle with identifying being an addict, right? Um, I had the same job for 20 years. You know, when I got into recovery, I had been employed at the same job since the early 2000s. I raised my daughter, um, always had food in the fridge, always had a roof over our head, always had a vehicle. So it was hard for me to identify that. 2009, I find out that my mother, she feeling ill. She goes to the hospital. Um, we find out she has end stage cirrhosis of the liver. Um, Now we had no knowledge of this. When we found out, it was already towards the end. My wife has had a lot of health issues forever since she was like 17. So had, to date, she's had 3 kidney transplants. At this time, I think she had 2. Um, so she connects my mother, with her hospital, John Hopkins. My mother gets in that through gift of life. She gets a liver transplant. This is 2010. Um, at that time, there was one rejection medicine that was available for liver transplants. The transplant successful. They send my mom home. She takes the rejection medicine. She gets ill. She goes back to the hospital. She was allergic to the only rejection medicine. Um, so at that point, they tell us like there's nothing really we can do for you. So they put her on hospice. Um, we just have to deal with that, right? So we know it's coming. We're going to her home every day. Um, that would be where I feel like I reached a point where it's like, okay, I can't do this anymore. So, in order for me to go see my mother, which I was obligated, not only that was my personal obligation, I felt that I had to do that, even though it would have been easier not to do that. So I would make sure that I was drinking and high, to an excessive amount so that I wouldn't feel anything while I was there. You know, my mother passed in 2010. It took just a few short months from that point. My younger brother, who struggled with alcoholism, um, had lived with my mother his whole life, right? He never really left the nest. He never got a job. He never got a driver's license. He just kind of stayed there, right? So when that happens, my brother kind of spirals. That goes on for a year or so. He then gets into recovery. I'm still in active addiction. Needless to say, I'm still very proud of him, supporting him. He ends up getting 4 years of sobriety under his belt. Then in 2017, there was a whole situation that happened where, his girlfriend was like calling me and my older brother and was asking, have you talked to your brother? He's not responding to me. I'm worried. He always responds to me. We kind of knew information that she didn't, involving like another woman. So we just kind of were like, blew it off, right? At the same time, I am texting my brother, but he's not responding. And that wasn't abnormal. My brother wouldn't always respond to us. So that goes on for, a day and a half. At that point, I'm calling him and texting him more. He's not responding. I remember I was at the bar. It was like noon, middle of the week. And I called my older brother and I said, something's not right. Let's go check on Chad. So I left the bar. We drove to his house. His car was in the driveway. The doors were locked. Nobody was answering the door. My older brother climbs through the dining room window, and my brother had relapsed. Yeah, so that was another moment where it's like, okay, what is the pardon me.
Go for it, man. It's
So
all good.
I tell my story for a living, but this is much more in depth and personal to me. So it's, I apologize.
No need to apologize. I understand.
Yeah. So, at that point, what is the point of all of this, right? Even if I were to achieve recovery, one bad decision could erase everything. So, at that time I was drinking excessively. I was, I was getting high, but it was like a when I could afford it kind of thing. Like, I kind of went off the rails at that point. At some point there was a decision made from like, trying so desperately to like get cocaine to like the easy accessibility of methamphetamines. And that was a curse at the time, but now I'm able to look back and I thank God that I made that decision, because it's brought me to where I am now. I struggled with the methamphetamine use. That kind of accelerated very fastly. It went from $20, $30 bags that would last a week to $150 bags that would last a day. It accelerates exponentially fast. And the depression had gotten so bad that I wasn't going to work. I worked in a warehouse for 20 years, driving a forklift. I had FMLA, right?
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you're familiar, but family medical leave of absence.
Yeah.
And that was for my mental health. I have struggled, like I talked about in the beginning, with my mental health my whole life. But, from 2019 to 2021, when I got clean, I was kind of in and out of short stay mental health facilities. And, I was going in and out because I was using the methamphetamines, I was drinking, but I wasn't being honest with them. I was just telling them I'm struggling with mental health, and then it's the that victim mentality of like, well, look at all that's happened in my life, and this is why I'm struggling with my mental health. So that all kind of propelled me to make, it was a turning point where I noticed in your intro you have the phrase that I use all the time, the gift of desperation. I had reached a point where it was like, okay, I have a wife, I have a daughter, and at this time I had already had grandchildren. So it's like now I can recognize my extreme selfishness, and what am I going to do? I went into treatment, got connected to 12-step programs, and things have changed dramatically, a 180. I left the warehouse. I got my certification as a peer, so I'm a certified peer. And I did that because this is my purpose. I still made way more than I make now, so it's not about in the warehouse. It's not about financial. It's about purpose. I went through my whole life without purpose. I didn't have any reason to wake up in the morning. I had to, but I wasn't appreciative, or I didn't have the gratitude to understand why. This recovery journey has given me direction in life. Currently working towards my CADC, which is Certified Drug and Alcohol Counselor. And I start a new job next week, actually, in the prison system. I've been at where I work now for 2 years, and I'm trying to work with other populations. I'm just trying to gain as much experience and knowledge as I can. But yeah, that's, believe it or not, the brief short story.
Yeah. First, I want to say thank you for your vulnerability, man. It's not easy to talk about these things, especially losing family members, and our addiction and our mental health disorders. So first, I want to say I'm eternally grateful for you sharing your story. Second off, I can relate. I had a really rough childhood growing up, and that did contribute to some of my use when I was in my addiction. Then I can relate to my dad was a severe alcoholic and addict. He was a truck driver, so when he wasn't on the road, he was getting fucked up. And and like you said, the mental and emotional and physical abuse. I went through that too with my dad. I can relate so much with that. And my mom wasn't around my childhood, man. She left when I was 11, and then came back in my life when I was 21. And I don't know life with her when I was a kid, and in some ways I'm grateful because my mom was also an addict. So in that way, I understand that, but I can definitely empathize with you, man. And like when you started to share those moments where you started to see things trickle downhill with your mom and your sister, man, I felt that. I really did. Um, my brother, my youngest brother, well, younger brother, he was an addict for a very long time, super long time. But it was so much so, like when I was growing up, my dad never paid attention to me because I was the oldest, or never paid attention to him because he was the youngest and I was the oldest. So it was always hammer on me. Didn't pay attention to him. So my brother was out, running amok on the street, and he went to jail a bunch, and finally got clean and sober, and I'm grateful for him. My next question, I guess, would be, what was that nexus that you reached that you said, man, shit's got to change because this ain't getting better?
Yeah, so I started to to touch on that, and I kind of lost my train of thought. But yeah, so I was I had FMLA from a mental health, right? But the depression had gotten so bad, there was a point in time where I managed to survive, where I needed that substance to go to work. If I didn't have something in my pocket, if I didn't have something when I woke up in the morning, I wasn't going to work. I managed that, right? And not well, because I was spending money that we didn't have. I was lying to my wife. I was hiding. I was manipulating, all the things that go along with that, right? But then, the next level to that was I needed it, but I still couldn't come. And it's hard for people who haven't experienced it to understand even how that's possible, but it's real. So I would have my alcohol, I would have the methamphetamines, but I still couldn't leave bed, So because I have FMLA, I can't be held accountable for my absenteeism. I would just call out every morning, and I would just stay in bed. And, it became very apparent you can't go on like this. Like, you're either going to have to take your life, or you're going to have to do something drastic to make this change.
Yeah.
I would stay in bed for, if I couldn't get anything, whether that was not having the money or, not being able to find it through, someone not having it or whatever. There were points where I would sleep for 36 hours, but I remember not wanting to get up to go to the bathroom. That always stuck with me. Not a huge house. The bathroom is directly across the hall from my bedroom, 15 steps max. And I would hold it until I was about to, pee on myself, and wait to that very last second before I would get up to go to the bathroom. I've always been a big guy. I love food. I wasn't eating. My wife would have to bring me food and basically force feed me because I just want to eat. So at that point, again, I just made a trip to the mental health facility and still wasn't honest. The thing about honesty is, if you're not honest with yourself, it's impossible to be honest with anybody else, because you don't know truth. And, I go in there this last time, which was January of 2021. This is COVID. This is like this whole thing, right? And I tell them I'm struggling with my mental health. I'm super depressed. They admit me, and I was just in such a dark place. I remember I sat in the corner for hours, and with my head in my lap, and I just sat there. And at some point, one of the techs had noticed, and she knew me because I had been in there so many times. And she comes over to me and she says, this is like extreme for us to see you in this condition. So, like, let's go in this office and let's talk. So she pulls me in. She's not a medical professional. She's just a tech, right? So, I've thought about this a lot. I don't think she said anything magical, Yeah. I was just ready. And, for some reason, I told her, like, well, drugs and alcohol are a major problem in my life. And I think at that moment, saying it helped me realize the truth,
Yeah.
she suggested I go into a 30-day program. Again, the disease of addiction was presenting me with all these reasons why that's not possible, right? My wife is sick, my wife's health, I won't be able to see my grandchildren, like yada 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 yada. After talking to my wife, sitting on that for a few hours, I was like, okay. I said I was at a point where I would do anything. Let's just give it a try. I had good health insurance through the warehouse. So the rehab facility that I was accepted into was all the way up north in northern Pennsylvania. It's like by Syracuse, New York, right? Mm-hmm. 5 hours north from where I live. The rehab sent a driver down. So they sent a driver 5 hours to come pick me up. I did what they call a bed to bed. When the driver comes, I get in the car, and the first thing he says is, well, we have to go to Baltimore, which is, another hour and a half south, to pick someone else up. We're going to the VA in Baltimore. So we drive all the way down to the VA in Baltimore. We pick up this guy. His name was Tim. Me and Tim now take the 6.5 hour north ride to the facility. During that ride, I kind of connected with Tim. Not kind of, I mean, we connected, right? He was much older than me. He was in Desert Storm. He was a member of Alcoholics Anonymous for many years. But he was in and out. He kind of, went in and out of recovery. But he was very familiar with the 12 steps. And he had found out that he had cirrhosis. So this was like his last ditch effort to get clean, or, to get into recovery. We talked a lot about the 12 steps. We talked about war and trauma and all that stuff. But, I made it very clear, like the 12 steps, I'm not denying it works for some people, but for me, it's just not really something that I could get behind. I always had a mentality of like, there can't be a God, right? Because, for me, it was always victimization. My life has been so horrible. If there is a God, I don't like him. And he obviously doesn't like me. Like, look at me, all this stuff that happened to me, right? Yep. And, he provided a little bit of education about the whole God thing when it comes to the 12 steps. But I wasn't fully bought in, right? So, but I was open. Again, I had that gift of desperation where I was open. So we get into the program, and my wife, I've always been very connected. Me and my wife have been together since I was young, since we were young. And I went from my mother to my wife. I've never lived on my own. I've never been independent. I've always worked and I've always provided, but I was never self-sufficient. I was very codependent, to the point where when I went into this 30-day program, a 19-year-old kid had to show me how to do a load of laundry because I'd never done it, But, they had a policy where there was 5 AANA meetings a week at 7:00 at night. On Monday, it would be AA, Tuesday, NA, and so on. And every morning at 8 a.m., they had morning meditation. Now, the policy was if you don't attend both of those classes every day of the week, you don't get your 15-minute phone call to your family on Saturday. I hated the idea, right? At the time, it was like, what is this? But what it did was it forced me to participate in these things. It didn't take long, man. I attended a few meetings. I was blessed with like people who had experience with the 12 steps being in there. It was a lot of older guys. There was even a younger guy from Philadelphia who was super familiar with the program, and they were self-ran. So, like, these are all God moments that I'm very good at recognizing in hindsight. To this day, I'm still not good at recognizing in the moment, like, oh, that's a God thing.
Yeah.
But the woman in the mental health facility, Tim in the ride there, the policy, the people in the house when I was in that house. I found my sponsor 11 days out of the program. That was a big worry of mine because it's like I've always kind of been a quiet, like withdrawn person, very introverted. So I was thinking, how many meetings am I going to have to go to feel comfortable enough to ask this man to take my life in his hands? Because that's how serious this is to me. 11 meetings, man, 11 days. And it just happened,
Yep.
So, I've just stayed engaged, man, and I just stay connected. That's part of the reason why I went into the mental health and addiction field. The pain needs to stay fresh in my mind, That's why I do this. I want to share the message. I want to show people, give people hope. But I also want to remind myself, like, this was real. And like I said earlier, one bad decision, man, and I'm right back there.
Absolutely. When you were talking about the mental health tech that pulled you in and talked to you, man, the only thing that I could think of in that moment was she was the right person at the right time. And, we always have those people that are the right people at the right time, that come along and open us right up, and we didn't even expect it. Right. And then the vet from Baltimore, same thing. He was right place, right time. You had so many questions. I'm pretty sure you had so many questions, and he was there, and he was the one that had all the answers that you needed. And so many times along your journey, man, you've encountered people or situations that needed to be there in place at the moment you needed it. And it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Tim ended up passing away. He remains sober. After we got out of the facility, I stayed connected to him. But maybe 8 months to a year after being released, he passed away from his condition. That's another like reminder, right? Like it's easy when you're in active addiction to minimize everything. My wife we had many, many, many blowout arguments where my perception at the time was, you're making a big deal about nothing,
Yeah.
So what? I spun the car out and hit a median with our 6-year-old daughter in the backseat. Like, she's fine. Like, what are you talking about? But when you're able to remove yourself and gain some insight, hopefully you reach a moment where you realize, like, things could have gotten really, really, really bad at any moment. And I'm blessed to not live in that space anymore.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, one last question before we shut down shop. What are you doing now to maintain your sobriety and recovery? That's important. That's absolutely important. It's so much important that we go out and we help people, but also we got to help ourselves, because if we can't help ourselves, we can't help others.
Yeah, for sure, man. I do everything I can. I still go to meetings. I'm still engaged with that community. Um, I do service work. I work with, organizations that are nonprofits, whether that's events or whatever. I work in the field. My sponsor made it very clear when I told him that I was changing careers. This is not a substitute for your recovery. So I do want to put that caution out there, but it is a daily reminder. Helping people and seeing people in a bad place helps me remember why it is so important that I don't pick up that first drink or drug. I just try to give back, and I try to stay engaged. My part of the 12 steps, my self-reflection, my personal inventory, trying to do the next right thing, trying to, when I make a mistake, no one's perfect. When I start to drift off course, I have to have the awareness to recognize it, correct action, and get back on course. All of these things are so important, man. And then, self-care. I do what I can to enjoy myself. Me and my wife have been taking vacations. We have a vacation coming up to Mexico in September. For the first 30 years, I never left Delaware. I never left my couch.
Nice.
Yeah. Why would I spend money on that? I can't take my drugs on the plane. Drinks are more expensive. I've never been a go to the bar guy. I just want to get a fifth at the liquor store and go home,
Yeah.
So that self-care kind of thing, staying engaged, keeping the pain fresh in my mind.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You said something a few minutes ago. You said one slip up and you're right back at it. Right. And I just had somebody approach me and ask me, hey, would you ever be able to go back out and drink like a normal human being? And I said, absolutely not. No, I've been sober 5 years, right? Like, I know what happens next. I've been there many times, as I'm sure you have. I know what happens. And this for me is not. I'm not coming back. Right? There's no. And I know we can always come back, but I know this next one's going to do me. And so, realistically speaking, I don't ever want to put my position. I don't want to put my daughter in that position to have to bury her father. At least not right now. I want to die at an old age. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like an old, healthy age. And I don't want any potential future partner to have to worry about, like, man, he's fucking up again. I just want to. I want to be the best version of me that I can be, and it sounds like you're doing the same thing. And so I'm so glad that you hit on that. And you said it's not an option for me anymore. Going back out is not an option.
Yeah, I have. One of the huge hurdles for me was marijuana, right? I've smoked weed daily since I was 13. I mean, I've always smoked weed, and it becomes part of, like, you feel in it when you're in it. You feel it becomes part of who you are, right?
Yep.
I am the guy who smokes a lot of weed. Like, if you bring me up, my friends are going to say, man, that guy smokes a ridiculous amount of weed. And when I was in it, it was somehow like a badge of honor. It was the same thing with drinking. Like, oh, Breeze will drink you under the table. And it's like, yeah, that's me, you know?
Yeah.
So it was hard for me to make the commitment that I'm going to leave weed behind.
Yeah.
Because even now, I don't know if I could like identify moments in my life where weed was the direct cause of something so negative.
Yeah.
However, I can recognize that if I become comfortable smoking weed, now I can just have a beer.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And if I could just have a beer, then I can just drink on weekends.
Yep.
And then if I can just drink on weekends, well, now I can get a pill on a weekend. Yep. And it's a slippery slope that I'm not willing to engage in. So everyone's recovery is different. For me, it is 100% abstinence. Every day, you know, my recovery date is February 26th of 21. So every day that I put between me and my last usage, it becomes slightly easier. And I refuse to hit that reset button.
So you should never have to hit that reset button ever again. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
you're good enough. You're good enough. And you're talking about how it became a part of your identity, right? And two things. You know, I see somebody in my life that's very dear to me. That's just the same way that you just described. You know, that's her identity, right? Like she is the one that smokes on social media. She is the one that, you know, that goes out and gets high, but she's also the one that went from alcohol to pills to harder stuff to weed. And it's every step of the way, it's been literally her identity. And so, you know, I really hope that she gets it together and she understands like what she's doing. So that aside, that identity that you built in yourself, right? Like, oh, Breeze can smoke you or drink you under the table. Well, Breeze smokes a lot of weed, right? Like that must have been a hard transition to change that identity of who you were to who you are now. Because that massive night and day change.
Yeah, but you know, it's difficult for me. It was difficult to make the commitment and the decision.
Yeah.
The actual change came very naturally, right? Because that's so surface level. That's so like anyone can just commit to that, and it's available everywhere. Everybody does it. It's not a challenging thing, right? Once I found my purpose and my passion, which is recovery, which is the message, everything falls in line, man. You know, I've never had aspirations to start a business or be a business owner or anything like that, you know. Once I found purpose, it was like, okay, well, this is a way, a business is a way for me to spread the message. You know, so we didn't touch on this yet, but I have a clothing line. You know, it started off as like a t-shirt line called Fourth Dimension Apparel. If you know anything about the 12 steps, or your viewers know, I'm sure it's pulled directly from the big books, from the big book. And, you know, I do all the design work and printing out of my home. I try to create designs that will get people asking questions, because what we're doing right now is so important, you know, just getting people to talk and kind of slowly chipping away at that stigma and that kind of negative outlook on addiction as like a moral fallacy, you know. So that's purpose, right? Like that's real. There's substance to that. So yeah, it's hard to make the decision. It's hard to commit, but once you get the ball rolling, man, it's natural progression.
Absolutely. And the things that open up to you once you do get clean and sober, and like you start living in your purpose, right? Like stepping away from what you've naturally known your whole life, and then stepping into your purpose and actually being driven by your purpose. Things open up so much. You know, you even said it. You know, you're going on vacations, and like you said before, if you were in active addiction, you would never have done that because you wouldn't have wanted to put your money anywhere else, right? And so I'm glad that you said that, right? And I'll say right off the bat, I've looked at your clothing line. I'm gonna be buying some shirts. I promise you that. I promise you that. I'll be pushing your message.
I appreciate that, man.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mentioned that because what I was going to say is like, yes, I started a business, and yes, I put money into this, and I put time and effort into it. But I have no plans of like retiring off of selling a hoodie, you know? It's not about that for me, you know? It really is about the message. It is about getting people talking. It's about support. It's about, you know, contributing to the community. We donate a portion of all of our sales to local recovery organizations here in Delaware. So that's purpose, right? That's not like chasing the dollar, being a hustler. Do I do those things? Yes, but that's not who I am. My who I am is my purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I do this. I don't make any money from this. I don't make any money from podcasting. I don't make any money from any of the social media stuff that I do. I do it because of the message, because of the story, because of, you know, of individuals like yourself that share that come on and want to be vulnerable enough to share their story. And I think it's so important for us to connect as human beings at a base level, but also human beings in recovery, because it's hard to talk about these things, and it's hard to normalize the conversation around addiction, mental health disorders, and what have you. But I think once we get to that point where we can actually talk about it and without fear of judgment, I think it's like super easy. But I mean, me now, I've been doing this for a while. I don't care about what anybody thinks about my recovery journey. I don't care about what other people think, where they say, hey, I can't tell you how many times I've heard addiction's not a disease. And at this point, I'm just like, okay, if you don't want to read, that's okay. You don't have to. But I know it's okay.
You know, it's like I completely agree with like where you're coming from. I just choose to see it slightly differently. If someone doesn't understand, or someone wants to judge, I feel an obligation to educate, at least try. I want to provide information to try to help them understand. Plenty of people are not, they're not picking up what you're putting down, and that's okay. But I have to do my part, right? And then, you know, as far as like the disease of addiction, that's like a hot topic, right?
Yeah.
But it's like, is it really important? It's important for me as an addict to understand that addiction is a disease, because that helps me understand the severity of my condition.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's important for others to consider it a disease.
Yeah.
You know that I have something inside of me that is drugs and alcohol are a detriment to my life. You could call that whatever you want. An illness, a disease, a deficiency, whatever you want. That's unimportant to me. So
absolutely. I agree wholeheartedly. I think education is first and foremost in my life. I like to educate people. I don't like to pick arguments, right? Because arguments aren't going to solve anything. But education, providing them with, material, whether it's a pamphlet or the big book or DSM-5, just something for them to read to say, hey, look, I get it, right? And at a base level, if you look at it, the big book can be applied to every facet of your life. It doesn't even have to be about addiction. It can just be about living your life.
I say it all the time, man. People don't understand that the 12 steps are not about addiction. It's not about alcoholism. It's not about addiction. I honestly believe you could pick any person off the planet and throw them into a 12-step program. And if they're fully committed in bettering their life, they will benefit because it's a design for living. It's no matter if you struggle with addiction or not, before you go to bed at night, evaluating your day and making amends the next morning and having awareness to correct your wrongs, you know, having something outside of yourself that you are able to turn it over to and kind of, acceptance, all of these things, anybody can benefit from that, man. Anybody.
Absolutely. I agree. So before we go, what are 3 things you're grateful for today?
Ooh, it's a heavy question, man. Many, many years ago, it would have just been my job, my wife, my car, or, these things. Today, I would say I'm grateful for God first and foremost. Um, God has kept me going. God has gotten me to where I am now. He's carried me through all of this, and I believe He will continue to do so. Um, I'm thankful for the recovery community and recovery in general. If my eyes weren't open to the recovery community, I would have continued going on thinking it wasn't possible or it's not. I went through my whole life where no one in my family got clean and sober. To this day, no one outside of my younger brother had really even thinks about recovery. So that being brought into my awareness and being able to connect and stay engaged, huge. And family, that's that everlasting purpose. That is the reason for being for me. I think that family is one of the keystones of life. Like that's just what we're here for. So
Absolutely. I agree. Where can we find you at, brother?
yeah, so we have a website for the clothing line, fourthdimensionapparel.com. That's the number 4th, dimensionapparel.com. We have social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram mainly. We do have a TikTok. And when I say we, I mean, this is me. My wife helps out a little bit, but I'm a little old, man. So TikTok I'm trying, but I'm not very active on there. We aren't very active on there. So check us out. And if you sign up for updates, and you'll get 15% off your first purchase, and everything goes, a portion of all sales go to the recovery community. Majority of it gets reinvested back into spreading the message.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. I'm so grateful for you. I'm so grateful for a human being like you. And I'm so grateful for your story. Thank you for sharing it, brother.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you having me on, bro. It's been fun. This is what we do, right?
Absolutely. Sharing the message. All right, y'all. Until next time, I hope you guys have a good week. And remember, be kind to yourself. Be gracious. You are loved. You are worthy. And you are worth it. Goodbye.